Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Chat with Matt. I am your host, Matt Zerbe, here at Wasco Nursery in beautiful St. Charles, Campton Hills, Illinois. And I've got a wonderful, I think a wonderful talk prepared for you today on adding color post 4th of July, adding color to your garden or landscape. So one of the things that I have commonly, preached, if you will, to people is you need to come to the garden center every month and find blooming plant material, or just be very specific with your planning. If you're doing all your planning early in the spring, that's totally fine, but make sure you're picking plant material that's going to bloom, kind of staggered bloom times all throughout the summer months. One of the things that I see fairly regularly when I go to people's homes for a site visit or something like that is everything they have blooms in April and May, and then there's no color the rest of the season. I actually see this very frequently because as a trend, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I've heard various statistics that 90+% of plant purchases are done in the springtime. And so a lot of people have X amount of dollars that they have set aside to spend on plant material. They blow that in the springtime, buying annuals, flowers, vegetables, all that kind of stuff, whatever's looking good at that time, and then they don't do anything the rest of the year. And I think you're really missing out on a very colorful time of the year, specifically for perennial plant material. So we are zone 5. I've brought a bunch of really good zone 5 hardy plant material that is just now coming into bloom, that will now bloom basically for the rest of July, most of the cases, the rest of July and into August. Really going to give you some spectacular color. So there's really no rhyme or reason to the plant material that I've brought up here in terms of like sun, shade, tall, short, anything like that. There's no other kind of thing that keeps all of these together other than the fact that they bloom at this time of year. So I'm just going to jump right into it. This is actually a plant here called Cherry Sparks Penstemon. And I talked about this early on in one of the videos earlier this season, but this is a wonderful hummingbird plant. And at home, mine has been blooming since, I think I planted it in mid-May, and it was blooming at that time of year, and it's still blooming right now. I really like this. It's only about 18 to 20 inches tall, so not a very tall penstemon, but it's got this great, beautiful red tubular flower that the hummingbirds absolutely love. They love that tubular shape where they can get their little beak in there and get their long tongue and drink the nectar out of the backside of the flower. So love that. This is going to be full sun to part sun and only about 20 inches tall. I find that penstemon do well in various soil types from fairly dry to even, kind of slightly moist. Certainly doesn't love a really wet soil, but great plant. And I've been really happy with the one that I planted at home this year so far. In fact, last night the hummingbird was cruising through that area and stopped and fed off of my Cherry Sparks. I guess if we're talking hummingbird plants, we can jump onto this. This is a Monarda or bee balm. Now, there's a lot of different types of Monarda. Many of them are native here in northern Illinois. This is technically a hybrid, but has a lot of heritage of eastern bee balm, which is native to like Ohio, out to the Atlantic coast. We don't have a lot of Monarda. It's called Monarda didyma or eastern bee balm, but we're really close to its native range, probably even into Indiana. This particular one is a shorter variety called Pardon My Purple. And one of the things that I note is that it's got a very dark green foliage, which tends to be a little more resistant to some of the powdery mildew type problems that some bee balm can get. And it has this wonderful purple flower on it. This is loaded with flower buds. So I've got some flowers that are just starting to open. I'll tip the plant and you can kind of see all of these buds in here. So this is a very heavy flowering variety. If I show you the tag on here, you can see it's showing the plant in full bloom where it's bloomed, kind of top to bottom, side to side. So beautiful kind of purple flowers, great citrusy, minty fragrance to this foliage, which I really like. The Various types of bee balms were used in teas by the Native Americans. So great all-around plant, great for the hummingbirds, great for the bumblebees and butterflies, and some of them are edible. So really cool plant. I also have found that this is fairly tolerant of full sun all the way to part shade. I actually have some of this at home in some of them that actually have reseeded themselves into some fairly shady locations and are still doing quite well and still bloom for me every year. So really great plant. Does spread a little bit, but nothing too crazy on that. This is a shorter variety. It only gets about 10 or 12 inches tall. There are varieties that will get 3.5 to almost 4 feet tall. So there's almost a size and color that'll fit just about any spot in the garden. Another East Coast native that is quite hardy and maybe even growing into the kind of some of the upper Midwest areas is something called Phlox paniculata. This particular one here is called Glamour Girl, and it has this beautiful sort of coral pink colored flower with a dark purpley red center to it, which kind of gives it this neat two-tone appearance. It also has a really wonderful fragrance to it. It kind of has a nice sweet, sort of perfumey type fragrance. Many of the paniculata phlox, or what we call garden phlox, we got a bumblebee over here checking out some of our plants, which are great for the pollinators. But the paniculata phlox or garden phlox are going to be midsummer bloomers. They're just coming into bloom. I have quite a few at home. They typically will bloom from, I would say, end of June. All of July is like primo time for them. And then they would bloom very well into August and sometimes even into September. So this particular variety is only going to get about 24, maybe 30 inches tall. Some of them can get 3.5 feet tall. Some of them are shorter. So again, you're going to want to look for one that's going to fit your size specifications. They come in whites, pinks, purples, reddish pinks, even some kind of orangey pink. So there's a lot of color options on the garden phlox. There's even some, they call them blue. They're kind of a purpley blue, but there's even some sort of blue ones like Blue Moon and a few others. I mentioned fragrant plants. I've got two others here that are quite fragrant. This particular one is a lavender called Sweet Romance. I brought this one up because it happened to be in full bloom. It is a very good variety. It's one of the smaller, more compact varieties. It'll get around 12 to 18 inches tall and about 18 to 20 inches wide. Whereas some of them that we've been growing, like Sensational and Phenomenal, get quite large. I have both of those at home. I have a Sensational that's all by itself that is every bit of 40 inches across right now and is in absolute full bloom. And then I have several Phenomenal lavender that are on the south side of my house, very hot, very dry location, right below some sunroom windows. And they are also in full bloom. And again, every bit of 3+ feet across. I've already cut a lot of flowers off and brought them inside, and they keep blooming and blooming. One thing to note about lavender is that they typically will rebloom for you if you give them a good haircut. So when these purple flowers are spent, like this one, I didn't bring up a pair of shears, I'll just kind of break that off. This particular one is kind of dried out and what we would call a spent flower. When the whole plant is starting to look like this, or the majority of the plant is starting to look like that versus these nice purple flowers, you can take the whole plant like this, like you're putting your hair in a ponytail, and then you can just cut this right here below my, where I've kind of got it bunched up. Just cut that all back. If you want to dry some of these, you can do that. They, of course, make great, potpourri. They're useful in cocktail recipes, and they're edible for a lot of different things, soaps, all sorts of stuff. So if you want a more compact one, Sweet Romance is really nice. If you want one of the larger ones, I like Sensational and I like Phenomenal. Those are both really good. One tip that I can give you on lavender is do not overwater them. And even more specifically, try to keep them a little on the dry side during the winter months, which I know sounds strange, but if you've got an area where you tend to pile up snow, you're shoveling it off the sidewalk or driveway, and piling it up somewhere, that would not be a good location for a lavender. You want it somewhere where it can stay relatively dry. Even mixing in a little bit of sand when you're planting wouldn't be a bad idea. So that's Sweet Romance lavender. Maybe we'll stay on the blues and purples here for a little bit. This is a wonderful ground cover plant that I brought up here. This is called plumbago. There are a lot of different types of plumbago. This is actually hardy in this area. There are a bunch of plumbago that are not hardy in this area. We actually looked at some of those when I talked about annuals and tropical plants several weeks back. But this is just starting to bloom. This is max height, so from the top of the soil or top of the pot to the top of my hand is only about 10 inches. That's about as tall as it gets. It is a spreading plant. In fact, you can see that it's actually growing right out. The roots grew out the bottom of the pot and then turned into stems. So you can see it makes a very nice ground cover. It's a wonderful rock garden plant. It is another one that does not love that extra moisture in the wintertime. Pardon me. So try to keep it on the dry side, especially during the winter. It tolerates part sun to part shade. If it's super hot and dry, I wouldn't recommend it. If it's full shade, I wouldn't recommend it. But I really do like plumbago. It also goes by the name of leadwort. It's a lovely ground cover and one of the few that is truly a blue flower. There's a lot of purpley blues out there, but the plumbago or leadwort is truly a blue flower. This is a delphinium right here. It also goes by the name of larkspur. And this is a little kind of shorter one that is a free flowering variety. So you can see it has a lot of stems in here, where some of the other varieties just have a very tall flower spike, which oftentimes needs to be staked and sometimes even breaks if you don't stake it. So some of these more compact free flowering varieties with these stems, you can see, I can wave this around and these stems don't break, where if I did that to some of the taller varieties, that stem might just crack in half. So this one is called Breezin. Beautiful kind of double flowering. So double flowering again means that it's got multiple layers of petals instead of just one layer of petals. And it's a two-tone, purple with kind of a lighter purple, almost white in there. So it gives it this really neat two-tone. This has been blooming for probably 2 weeks already and easily has another 2 to 3 weeks left. You can see if I spin the plant around, these have yet to open up over here. These are already kind of spent flowers right there. And then of course, this is all in full bloom right here. So you're kind of getting to see all the different stages of this plant blooming. Some of them are going to be more blue, some purpley blue. There's even some reddish varieties out there now. We're just coming into the summer allium season. So I brought over 2 of my favorites here. This one on my left is called Serendipity, and it is a proven winner's variety. The goal with Serendipity was to get what they were breeding for is more of a blue foliage color, which isn't showing up super great. We've had a bunch of rain this week, and so that powdery blue color actually does wash off a bit in the rain. And then after several days of dryness, it'll start to kind of get more blue again. But you can see if I put the foliage from this one on my right hand, if I put the foliage next to it, or if I put these very close together, you can see sort of the lighter greeny, even greeny yellow color of this one, which is Summer Beauty, and then Serendipity, which has that more blue color. So you've got a darker purple flower compared to Summer Beauty. I'll kind of put them side by side here, which has a lighter purple flower. And then you get that, so you get the nice dark purple and you get the blue foliage versus the green foliage and the taller flower stem of Summer Beauty. So on Serendipity, the flower sits just above the foliage. On Summer Beauty, it sits about 6 to 8 inches above the foliage. So it sticks up a little higher, showing off that flower a little more. There's also a neat variety that is a sport of Summer Beauty called Peekaboo. And Peekaboo is just like Summer Beauty, except for the flower sits just above the foliage like Serendipity and not up here on these longer flower stalks. Now, these are summer onions. You might be familiar with some of the onion bulbs or allium bulbs that you can plant in the fall that come up in the spring. They're very large bulbs and they can create some massive flowers, but the foliage is kind of blah. In fact, it just, you know, a lot of times the foliage comes up, it goes dormant almost immediately. It shoots up this long spike with a big flower on top, and then it goes away. These are summer onions. They're going to give you foliage all summer long. In fact, I love the foliage on these allium. I think they're a wonderful landscape addition. The summer beauty in particular, the foliage kind of twists as it goes up. It's probably very hard to see on the camera, but the foliage has a great texture to it. This will create a nice mound, just like the Serendipity has. This is just a more mature plant than this one right here. But you'll have this really nice mound of beautiful foliage that the rabbits don't like and the deer don't like. Everybody just tends to leave it alone. And it's a very hardy plant. So I love these. The butterflies like them, and all of the honeybees and bumblebees like them as well. So they're great for our pollinators. Full sun and fairly well-drained soil would be ideal for them, but they're tolerant of just about any soil. Another great one for the pollinators is this plant right here, which is called a calamintha or calamint. And this has a really unique kind of minty fragrance and is getting covered in these white flowers. It just started blooming. It's a really pale purpley white. This one is a white variety called Montrose white. The regular variety is like a real pale purple, almost white, but a great kind of spreading plant. It will reseed itself a little bit, so it's aggressive, but not overly aggressive, and has a really distinct minty fragrance to it. And then it just is loaded with flowers. And this will basically bloom for the rest of July and probably all of August as well. It has a very long bloom time. So very dainty flowers that do not need to be deadheaded or trimmed off at all. And this is going to be good for full sun. I love mixing this in with spring flower bulbs, which, you know, things like tulips, daffodils, hyacinths, all that kind of stuff. This is actually fairly late to come up in the springtime. So you can get those spring bulbs in there and they can do their thing. And then this will start leafing out in the spring, but it's kind of short and moundy. And by the time this gets tall and its foliage looks like this and it starts blooming, you know, all of your spring bulb plants are done for the year and can be cut back. And then this can be kind of the showstopper during the summer months. So it's kind of a good one if you are not fond of the, you know, kind of that ugly spent foliage from some of the tulips and daffodils and whatnot. I brought this one over because oftentimes I suggest hardy plants to people. I've got folks that come in and say, what can I plant down by my mailbox? I've got this really difficult growing environment. Everything I plant down there dies, you know, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that I commonly recommend are daylilies. And I typically get the same response from people, and it is, no, I'm bored with daylilies, or no, it looks too commercial, things like that. And they're not necessarily wrong. They are frequently used in parking lot islands. You know, you go over to some of the shopping centers and strip centers around here, and you'll see a bright yellow daylily called Stella de Oro. It's been, I mean, literally planted in just about every commercial development and every subdivision entrance and all that kind of stuff. But there are some really great, unique varieties of daylilies out there, like this one right here, which is called Sound of My Heart, which just has this beautiful two-tone. You've got the burgundy kind of center. You've got this peachy kind of outside with a nice yellow throat in the middle. And then to top it off, you've got these beautiful ruffles around the edges of the petals. This is just an absolute showstopper, but you can also see what a heavy blooming variety it is. So this flower here that I'm holding in my hand and this one over here in my other hand, both of these probably bloomed a day or two ago and now they're done. This one has opened up today and is in full bloom, but you've got all of these other flowers in here. So it's been blooming for probably a week or two because this one's completely spent. I see a few others that are completely gone. So it's probably been blooming for 2 weeks. It's probably got another 2 to 4 weeks left in it. And this is just in a little 1-gallon pot. So you can imagine this in the ground when it's full and established, you're literally going to have, you know, many dozen flower buds on there. I've got several beautiful varieties at home that are similar to this that I absolutely love. I've got some actually down by my mailbox. I've got some others along the driveway, and then just some others mixed into the beds. And I think they're great, easy to grow, very hardy, very drought tolerant, just a good low maintenance all around plant. On the opposite end of drought tolerance is this plant right here. This is a native plant called Coneflower. It is a water loving plant, or a plant that loves a little bit more moisture. I've frequently talked about it because it's one of my absolute favorites, and it is a wonderful hummingbird plant. This is a great plant if you've got a spot that's a little bit lower, like the back corner of the yard, where maybe all the water in your yard pitches to one corner. This would be great. This is going to be great at the base of a downspout where it just collects a little extra water. Or if you just have a kind of a lower, wetter spot, or if you don't mind doing some watering, it can be planted in any old bed and just keep it a little bit more on the moist side. It's just starting to bloom. This flower stalk has started first, but we've got all of these other flower stalks. Again, it's just a 1-gallon plant. So there's, when this is well established, you will have, maybe a dozen flower stalks on here. And all of these red flowers, they start blooming at the bottom and they work their way up until the whole stalk has opened up. So this is going to bloom typically starts blooming right around 4th of July and will bloom well into August. So great native plant, very hardy. It is not the longest lived perennial in the world. So oftentimes people only have them for 3 to 5 years. If you happen to have a low, wet, good quality soil, it will reseed itself. If you don't, you're probably just going to have to replace it every 3 to 5 years or so. But it really is worth it because it's a beautiful plant and a guaranteed hummingbird attracting plant. It obviously gets quite tall, about 36 to 48 inches tall is a kind of a good average for it. While we're on the topic of native plants, I brought up 2 coneflowers. Both of these are cultivars or selections of coneflower. We have several different types of native coneflower as well, seed-grown native varieties like pale purple coneflower or just straight purple coneflower. We have both of those in stock, and those are the ones that are going to be growing in our native prairies and natural areas around here. We also have a ton of different colors of these other coneflowers, or what we call cultivars or nativars. This particular one right here is called Playful Meadow Mama. And I maybe should have brought up several of these because it's a unique variety that its flowers kind of change colors. So they will be anywhere from sort of an orangey pink to a coral pink to a normal pinky purple. And so you kind of get this really neat variation in color in just one plant. Now we do have a whole bunch of individual colored varieties. We've got orange ones, white ones, pink ones, reddish orange, bright orange, yellow. So there's a lot of colors to choose from, but this one you kind of get this almost little rainbow effect. So I like that one. It's a shorter variety. This one's going to be about 20, maybe 24 inches tall. And then this variety right here is called Pink Double Delight. And so one of the unique things about this is the flower gets this really fuzzy center to it, as opposed to the traditional cone that you see over here. So it kind of gets this double flower, and then oftentimes it'll even spring out another flower out of the center. It's very strange, but it's got a neat, big kind of fuzzy, fluffy texture to it. And all of these are gonna like fold apart sun, well-drained soil. Coneflowers do not love to be overwatered. You'll wanna check the variety because some are fairly short in the 18-inch range, and some can be as tall as about 3.5 feet. Keeping along the lines of natives and well-drained loving plants, this particular one is called a butterfly weed. It is a member of the milkweed family, and it's one of the few that is not in full bloom yet. Mine at home is in full bloom. These are going to be bright orange colored flowers. It is a wonderful butterfly attracting plant. I've also noticed various moths on there. I've seen hummingbirds checking it out. I have all sorts of other insects on my milkweed. So you're gonna see a lot of insect activity on these, which is good because that brings birds, it brings all sorts of stuff. So I really like these. This is another one that really likes it on the dry side. If you're having trouble getting this to come back from year to year, it would be another one that I would recommend adding some sand to the soil. Just to loosen that soil up and make it a little bit more well-drained, because this particular variety likes a well-drained soil. If you want a milkweed, but you don't have well-drained soil, try the rose or swamp milkweed, which is in full bloom right now and really looking great too. This next one is one that's been really popular these last few years. It's just starting to come into bloom, and this is called a crocosmia. It is a wonderful lily-like plant. With this particular one has this beautiful two-tone, kind of orangey red with lighter orange flower. You can even see it out in the flower buds. It has some really unique coloring in there. It's just starting to bloom. This one is called Orange Pico. There's another variety called Lucifer, which is more of like a bright orangey red. These are gonna get 3 to 4 feet tall, sword-like foliage with these flower stalks up on top. It's a really neat plant all the way around and has been very popular these last few years. This one is actually not a blooming plant, but is, I mean, it does actually flower later on in the season, but I brought it up because its foliage just looks spectacular. We have a whole table full of this up front right now. This is a stone crop or sedum called Dream Dazzler, and it has burgundy foliage with a bright pink trim to it, and it's just a really striking color. So I love this as a border plant. It only gets about 12 to 18 inches tall, likes well-drained soil to average soils. The bright color is pretty spectacular. Sometimes you'll even see 3 colors on there. You'll see some green, you'll see some burgundy, and you'll see some pink. So it almost has like a tricolor foliage to it, which is very cool. And pretty hardy, pretty easy to grow plant. Again, keep it on the dryish side, which is nice. You don't have to do a lot of extra watering. Then last but certainly not least, I brought up one of my favorite Rudbeckias or Black-Eyed Susans. This particular one is just getting ready to start blooming, and it is called Little Gold Star. It is shorter than most Black-Eyed Susans. It only gets about 18-ish inches tall. Right now, I'd say it's only about 12 inches tall, and it's in full bloom, but it typically gets about 12 to 18 inches tall. You can kind of see that nice yellowy flower, which is just starting with that neat star-shaped kind of leaf pattern behind it. One of the other reasons that I like Little Gold Star is that some of the varieties of Black-Eyed Susan that are on the market have a specific issue called Rudbeckia rust. It's a fungal disease or a black spot disease where you'll get this kind of reddish brown blotches all over the foliage, and it's fairly unattractive and sometimes can be problematic for the plant. Little Gold Star really holds up well and doesn't tend to get that disease. So I like Little Gold Star. It's a full sun plant. It likes it on the dry side, is very easy to grow once established. It does really well. It does not need deadheading. The butterflies like it, the finches like it. A lot of the other birds will eat the seeds off of it as well. So great all-around plant. Rudbeckia, many of them are native here in Northern Illinois. And we do carry the seed-grown native varieties as well as some of these kind of newer varieties and cultivars that we've got in here. So I hope that maybe I've introduced you to a new plant or two today. There are literally probably 40 more varieties of perennials that I could have brought up today that are in full bloom, and it would have been a 3-hour video and just way too long. But it is a wonderful time of year to come to the garden center. We have a beautiful selection of hydrangeas. We've got a beautiful selection of perennial plant material. I think we're going to do a talk coming up soon on the perennial hibiscus, which I get a lot of questions about. They're just getting ready. I'd say they probably have another 1 to 3 weeks, depending upon the variety, before they're in full bloom. So I think I'm going to do a talk on those coming up and introduce you to some of my favorite varieties of perennial hibiscus. So there's really a lot to look at, and it's a wonderful time in the garden if you have the right plant material. So I hope that you get a chance to swing by the garden center one of these days coming up here, and I hope that you get a chance to get outside in the garden. Thanks for being with me.